So today's conversation or discussion is going to focus on the people, empowerment, management buy-in, and cyber resilience. And to start us off, let's talk about the people. It's very scary. Everyone in this room is in tech. So when I talk about the people, I'm not talking about you. Think about those other people in your organization. So how do organizations balance technology and human behavior in building a cyber resilient culture? Harvey, how do we do that?
Hi, everyone. And one of the key things that organization needs to consider when building resilience in people's culture is we've invested a lot in technologies, but we've not invested on people. We've brought all sorts of technology, but the people who are using this tech have not yet been trained and empowered on how to use it. So how do we need to do that? Just by simply creating a culture shift from a perspective of a die-hard management that you need to prove to an acceptance management that this thing is a reality and there are changes that we need to come and implement.
Interesting. So from that perspective, Bright, what do you think is the right way to empower employees on cybersecurity risks?
So we need to first of all understand what our employees even are and what do they do every day. Some employees will tell you the little thing they need is just basic training. So you find organizations don't even have a training budget. So employees don't have a training budget. They don't know how they're going to upskill. One engineer the other day I met him, he said he's quitting his job. He'd rather sit at home because there's nothing new to do. Nobody's challenging him. He feels like he's done everything that he needs to do. So something like a training budget, being able to actually get a mentor, even within the company, because, people are growing from one place to the other. It's something that we need to have to take into consideration. Without that leadership or that kind of empowerment of the young people in the organization, okay, young or old, it becomes quite difficult for anyone in the organization to grow. When it comes to cyber risk, if you're not getting close to the people who are managing some of your systems, they'll be the same people who will breach you.
Yeah.
Insider threats right now cannot be taken lightly. A few investigations we've been doing recently across a few companies, all of them have had the same kind of attack. Kevin is smiling because when we found out the way it was being done, we all just laughed. Like, this was too simple. It was such a simple thing, but it took us 1.5 months to discover exactly how that attack was happening. And it was just an insider. And that person most probably was not motivated enough to be able to say, you know what, I'm loyal to this organization to be able to actually carry out tasks. So sometimes it's just building that relationship, making it easy for them to have conversations. In that way, you can even spot if somebody is about to leave. You can spot out some of the anomalies or some of the changes in them in the everyday workplace.
Okay. So Kevin, Bright just spoke about the need to educate people, but then he also spoke about budget. So how do we get the management buy-in in this space? How?
It's better, thank you. So I'll give a use case. How I've seen it being done. Of course, you need executive buying. That's a must. Without executive buying, you cannot run any cybersecurity program. It's very impossible. So the executive needs to be trained on why security is important. Why should they care about security? So that's a question people don't answer. Why should we care about security? They only care about it once an incident happens. That's why they're like, oh, wow, we didn't realize that security can have a big impact. So number one is to have executive buying. And when you go to speak to the executive, use very simplistic language. Remove all the jargon. Speak about the risk. This is the company. This is the risk. This is what cyber can cost the company in case of an eventuality. So once you get the board buying, now you trickle down to the C-suite buying. So you need to form good partnerships with the C-suite because you'll need the CFO, you need the CTO to understand what you want to achieve. Right.
Yeah.
So after that, what I like to do is I like organizing one-on-ones with the managers So because managers are very close to teams, it's very hard for me to reach to a normal engineer, but a manager can because they have an existing relationship. So there's something that we call champions within the organization. So you create champions within each department by using the managers to push the cybersecurity agenda. Probably let me use one example. Currently we have an automation whereby you don't have to do training like what we do today. Training has been pushed to teams. There are agents, let me call them AI agents, that you can use and integrate with teams, and it will always prompt users that, hey, there's a new topic, phishing. Would you be interested in doing this training? And it times you, let's say it tells you like, are you free this week? Can you do this training? It should only take you 5 minutes. And then what happens? As the manager of that individual, I have a dashboard that I can track how well are my people doing the trainings, who is not doing the training, where are they failing, why are they failing? And then when I have the one-on-ones with them, I can address those issues. So it needs to trickle down to the users, and how you can do it, leverage the relationship that the managers have with the employees. And that's the best way that you can push security training to the people.
Thank you. Speaking of emerging threats, Robert, let's talk about the biggest cybersecurity threats organizations are facing today. Qua ground.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. So, I want to start by saying this: the attacks from a big picture perspective, they don't really change. The small details are the ones that change, but the attacks are mostly on identity, and that's what we're seeing every day. If you hear of a malware called an infostealer, you think, looks good. It won't do much, but that is key to every other attack out there. It is part of a very complex chain of the rest of the attacks, whether they are ransomware or attacks that have financial fraud or theft of your compute resources as an impact. All of them start with the theft of an identity. And there's a huge, the trend that we see a lot in security operations is that this malware, there's so many variants, and most of them they target the most ignored part of your IT assets, the browser. Because how many of you have centrally controlled browsers in the organization? How many of you update them regularly, right? So they target that. And then the next infection chain is usually basically infecting what you might search. In fact, if they know that right now everyone is searching DeepSeek, you'll notice that in the last 1 week, let's say 2 weeks, so many actors went and registered domains related to DeepSeek, knowing that there would be interest there. So when you visit these new platforms, there is a way that they would trick you into supplying at least a component of your identity that they then use to do the rest of the infection. The other attacks are, of course, based on emerging technologies like DeepSeek. I believe the technology is new, DeepSeek, but the attacks that it faces are very old. Most of the attacks last week were from bots, and very old bots like the Mirai family. So while the technologies will keep changing, we still have to retain our basics. So the incidents, the type of incidents and the way they manifest will stay more or less the same. The variations are different. I think one of them, another that we were looking at is where employees are targeted through trusted systems like LinkedIn. They target your very career. Every one of us looks to move to greener pastures. So what happens if someone comes into your inbox with a greener pasture and just wants you to supply X, Y, and Z, and you're good to go? So that's another that we are seeing a lot.
Interesting. So we've covered the people aspect on how to do the training. But then the question is, Bright, how do we measure if the training is working? Some of us just do the training for the sake of it. So how do we measure this?
I think that question should have gone to Kevin Kanye, but because he lives and breathes that kind of a thing. I mean, it's very difficult to measure some of those things, but we need to actually be able to simulate some of these attacks. Remember in my presentation, I talk about the fact that we need to actually simulate some of these things to make sure that it's working. When you do a phishing campaign in an organization, half the time it's usually the senior management, like I said, are the ones. So we track who opened the email, who clicked, who submitted data. And you see, most of the people who submit data is always what? C-suite, But sometimes the data that gets submitted is very, it's usually maybe the normal everyday user when you tell them things like salary review, fill this form, your new HR portal, and they will always submit those kind of information. So we need to keep on doing that and do continuous training to make sure that these people understand the gravity of that. However, we can't do this as a casual training of just PowerPoint slides and telling them, you can be hacked. No, you need to show them that some of these details can be there. I'll give just to conclude that, I'll give a typical example of what the info stealer. My method of training people about info stealers is to show you what password has leaked for the top 10 organizations, including yours, through some of the platforms that we work with. So if you see that, it actually shows you not just passwords. It shows you even your LinkedIn, your entire URL. Some of them collect your history. So collect so we did that some time back. We saw that somebody, their browser goes to other similar websites. So every time the person goes to, say, equitybank.com, there's always another equitybank.something.say TK. That gets to pop up in the person's browser after like a week. So the browser is always being pushed to a different portal, and they think it's the same, right? And I'm like, this is because of the info stealers, which are stealing those details. They steal your cookies, they steal your history, they steal your passwords for websites they can actually grab from. So it's becoming a very pertinent issue that we need to look into, and there's only so much we can do, but awareness training, demonstrating some of these things, showing them what is leaking out there, it's really helpful.
Okay. So on building resilience, is there any policies that an organization can implement to enhance their cyber resilience?
Yes and no. What we usually say with Bright is it's very particular to the organization, because whatever we term as the most critical assets, so those are assets that the companies use to make money or customers have an interaction with, is different for majority of the companies. So when you're drafting your policy documents, you should have some few aspects in mind. Number one, who is your threat? Okay. Many companies, they do not answer who is your threat, and we see that through policy documents. They are very vague. Number two, what will they go after? So if your policy document can depict who is your threat, what will they come after, why will they come after it, when and where, then now you have the basis to create the policy document. Why? Because your policy document will address the who. The who is the biggest risk. So malware is not the biggest risk, it's the person that controls that malware. So that's the person we're interested in, right? So the mistake people make is you think that a malware or a phishing campaign is your threat, but the threat is this person creating that phishing campaign or creating that virus or malware, because they're the ones who have the intent. So if you can understand the who, can understand what they'll come after. Now, when you're drafting the policy documents, you'll draft them in a way we understand who will come after them, how they'll come after them. So the policy documents will be a reflection of what do we need to do to protect against the who and the what and the how. But majority we've seen, they're ChatGPT templates. Yeah, you find that a document in 3 companies, the documents are similar, even in writing. And you're like, yeah, this is ChatGPT. So policy documents should be very simplistic. I love two-pager documents. Why? Because how many of us would read a 5-pager document as a policy?
No one.
2-pager? 1-pager? Thank you. So it means your documents probably should be a 1-pager, no fluff, no jargons, direct to the point. Who, what, and how. bare minimum policies. Number one, have an asset inventory. You cannot protect what you don't know. Number two, software, a software policy document, understand what is running on the systems, right? Number three, probably understand your users, who has access to what and why, because hackers will use access, they'll use usernames, passwords, credentials to access the systems. Number four, probably introduce monitoring. So let's see, so how do I track who logs in where, through which asset, what programs are used to log into the system? So if you use that chain, you build resilience because you understand who targets you, what they'll use, and now your counter offense or your counter intelligence is to build resilience to counter the who, to counter the what, and to counter the how. And now put all that in a policy, in a one-pager or a two-pager policy document. Yeah.
Yes, go on.
So Kevin once asked me, we're doing a drill. So we do drills, just learning about our cybersecurity engineers. And he's like, can you imagine how many companies still run PowerShell on their Windows machines? I know majority of you are victims. Who still allow DLL files to run? Who still allow command prompt to still run on their machines? Yet those are the things that get to run in the background to infect those machines. And when they infect the machine from there, it's a lateral movement. They just use that machine to pivot through the entire network. So as simple as PowerShell, your finance director does not need PowerShell. HR does not need PowerShell. The techies might need it, but majority of them don't use it. So we started doing the math, like, okay, if we did analysis of some malwares, and it was just when you break down those malware details, you see they use command prompt. If it doesn't work, they go to PowerShell. If it doesn't work, they go to what they call run DLL32. If it doesn't work, they go to, it goes on like that. There are very simple tools that can be done, and across the policy in the organization, you can lock them all down. Not that you don't have to go to the 3,000 computers in the organization. So I just remember that when they're talking about what software is really running on your machine, we forget those minute commands that come with the computer, and we need to just think of that.
I like the fact that you've broken down a policy document. So if there's anyone in this room that doesn't have one, you know where to begin. There's no excuse not to have it. It's given as the overview. If there's one key takeaway you would want the audience to take home with them today, what would it be?
I'd ask them between a hen and an egg, which one came first? Between a hen and an egg, which one came first? So that will take us to a scenario whereby between a risk, a threat, and a vulnerability, which one will keep you awake at night? So if you define that which will keep you awake at night, your organization will be, let's not say in a better place, but far more better than where it was. One key takeaway will be, let us create a culture in people. Let us keep on training and simulating this often than not. Let us make it as a policy during the orientation process when you are bringing employees to the organization. Make sure that they go through the data protection policies and act. Make sure they are going through the cybersecurity training and awareness, in that if they go, they are aware. Right now, I will tell you, no CFO will go and change their password. We have a change password policy. And you will find them, one of them will be kibet. Because we said you must use a special character, it will be kibet at 1234. Yeah, and most of us are culprit of that. Let us create a policy in that on that platform that they are using, if it does not, if the password is not even 8-bit character or 12, it will not accept. If it doesn't have the mixture of this, it will not be acceptable. So policies are there. So let us try and see how we can enforce these policies to the people. As I find this as a buzzword that people are the weakest link. So what do we do to make them the guardian angel of our systems?
Sorry, I can give an answer to, there's something interesting. You said threat, risk, vulnerability. How many of us know the difference between the three? ChatGPT.com. So let me just quickly give an answer. The those three things are different. So take it this way. If you have a vulnerability, but there's no threat, do you have to worry? Why? There's no threat. Vulnerability exists, but there's no threat of exploitation. So the risk is minimal. But what I usually told, think about the risk, then think about the vulnerability. But again, if there's no one to exploit it, why should you really scratch your head?
Yeah.
So again, the most important thing is the person that would exploit your systems. So if there's a vulnerability, there's a low capability of exploitation, reduces the vulnerability, reduces the risk. So now you don't have to scratch your head. So that may help you to make quick decisions, whereby because someone will come and ask you, hey, you're vulnerable. Okay, then ask them, okay, so where is the threat? Who is the threat? Is there any threat? No. So what happens to our risk? The risk is minimal and you're good. So you have to change how we think of these things.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, we had the FortiGate exploit. It's been there since 2022.
Yeah.
But nobody was there to exploit it. So nobody thought it was a vulnerability until the data leaked before somebody at least started waking up.
Yeah. Robert, you are saying something?
Yeah. So from the policy perspective, it's good to have it on paper, but then have it on a system too that forces you to implement it the same as Javier said. Because most of the policies out there are in very beautiful, safely kept papers or documents somewhere. They never get life. And this means they are ineffective either way. And some of these policies are governed by what culture you've inculcated in your business. If your business is targeted towards compliance, remember, you can be compliant without being secure, right? And you can be secure without being compliant, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those two truths can live together. If you don't find a balance between compliance and doing real cybersecurity work, all this will come to naught. And the reason I say that is when you're building a cybersecurity strategy for your enterprise, you will have like 4 inputs. You'll have what we started with, the people. Then you'll have policies governing these people. And then you'll have compliance frameworks that you use. And those compliance frameworks help you to choose which technologies to work with, right? If it's just those 4, it's quite simple, right? Why is no one secure enough? Is there a 5th nuance somewhere? Yeah? And what is it? So it is because everyone tries to lift someone else's practice and fit in the environment to retrofit. Yet his critical assets and my critical assets are not related. He's in cloud, I'm on-prem. Or he protects 10 devices, I have 1 million devices. So why our strategy is the same? And on top of that, when we target compliance more than doing real cybersecurity work, sometimes it is not because that's what we know. It's because that's what is being driven by the leadership, right? Maybe the executives have learned that we need to implement ISO 27K or 27001 and 2 and NIST 853, and we'll be good. Mm-hmm. And they push that culture across the business. So everyone knows there's a list somewhere we need to all tick, and that will pervade, it will go through the whole organization. It will rob all those other individuals that could have done a different thing of doing the actual cybersecurity work. Yeah.
Good. At this time, I'd like to take one question from the audience. Yes.
Good afternoon. Mm-hmm. So, 2 questions. So one was about, which was just touching on the policy that I think Javi was pointing out around changing of passwords. I've noticed a lot of the larger platforms, Google and such, are actively moving away from passwords because the practice of changing passwords means that people start doing weird things like writing them down or putting in repeatable elements, which makes it easier for guys to get, once you figure out the last sequence, it's very easy to start figuring out the other possibilities. So just maybe you could just mention something about that. And then the second thing, especially around maybe not understanding the motivation around threats. And I'll give my own personal example because I did myself in. I was looking for a PDF editor, and then all the PDF editors are expensive. And so you start looking for free, cracked. I found one, I installed it, and then a Russian guy started playing tunes on my Spotify. He was very rude. So I think, so the challenge around that is sometimes you've got guys who are coming out, not because they've decided they want to be nefarious or malicious within the organization, but they may not have access to a particular resource. And in their, from good intentions, they're like, let me save the company a few bucks by going to whatever site I am and I download this thing, which ideally should solve this problem. And then that creates another thing. How do you guys have that conversations? Because that's not even a CISO. I did myself in and I'm the CISO guy. So what have you guys told people about that kind of stuff?
Okay, quick answer. Less than a minute.
The second question.
Yeah.
I was gonna just answer briefly because you can actually push those policies across the entire company. If you have a centrally managed kind of like EDRs or whatever it is, say anybody who goes to a cracked website or a crack whatever page, it stops you. A free torrent website. I don't know if torrent still exists, but it's not getting to do that. But it still do. Oh, I didn't know. So people still torrent, people still use Google Docking to be able to get those things because Brett has shown you online how to use Google Docs to get free stuff. I teach people a lot of that. But if you go to those websites and download those executables to your machine, you're affecting everybody. So you can actually push policies on your solutions that you have internally and make sure it stops them from actually doing that. Also, if you look at the kind of traffic of people downloading massive data, you can actually slow down that traffic and say between 4 and 5 or 4:30 and 8 a.m. Instead of somebody using one of your servers as a media center, you basically can slow down the machines for those. So it's learning your network, your systems, the people who are actually downloading, whose machine has been infected and is going to very funny websites, then start slowing down those kind of traffic. I think that can be one way to do that because you human beings, out of the 3,000 employees you have, it's very difficult for you to go to each and every person and tell them, do not. You tell them 1,001 times, they will still do it.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think we can continue this conversation outside. It's broad. Find the panelists, pick their mind, and thank you. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. And thank you guys for listening. A photo for the panelists.